Still learning. So hi guys, I'm so excited to be sharing with you today. This is my first time doing anything on Zoom or any sort of presentation, so just bear with me. We'll try and make it flow as seamlessly as possible, but who knows? Never know. Got to be prepared for anything. So yeah, I had a feeling that, a lot of you would be fairly new to Ayurveda. So I kind of put together a little presentation so we can kind of just get the background information on Ayurveda and the doshas before we dive into the food. So I'm going to pull that up here and then I will start talking. But before we start, does anyone have any questions or anything they want to share? And just feel free anytime you have a question, if I'm going too fast or if something just doesn't quite make sense, then feel free to just interrupt and ask a question. No need to wait till the end, because sometimes we just forget our questions by the time the end comes. I'm just going to get my screen going here. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, and you can see the screen, all is good?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so Ayurveda and diet. So we're gonna start, again, like I said, by just going over a little bit about what exactly Ayurveda is, since many of you seem to be new. So Ayurveda can be described as the sister science to yoga. That's the healing branch of yoga. It derives from the Sanskrit words life and Veda, so it's life knowledge. It's a holistic healing system. So beyond Western medicine, that puts that emphasis on just our physical health, maybe a little bit of mental, but usually focused more on the physical health. Ayurveda actually covers physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So through Ayurveda, there's just different methods of healing, often preventative type measures via diet, herbal remedies, exercise and lifestyle regimens. And all of these things are just tailored to the individual. So there's no kind of like one size fits all solution to health in Ayurveda. It really is about looking at people as individuals and then treating them from there. So Ayurveda actually comes from the ancient spiritual texts known as the Vedas, and this is like a 5,000-year-old plus science. So it's not, anything new age. There's so many health trends out there, and some are good, some are bad, but Ayurveda, I feel like it's been around for so many years, and it's practiced by so many in the East, and now it's luckily coming to the West. I feel like it's coming at a time where we really are needing it with so much going on in the world. So I'm excited to be learning, be sharing, and for this to be coming over here and for us to start looking at health in a more kind of like preventative medicine kind of way. So basically Ayurveda teaches us to live in harmony with the basic laws of nature, aiming to achieve balance on all levels of being. So again, it's kind of different from our Western medicine where we, tend to treat the disease after the fact. Instead, Ayurvedic medicine, again, looks at people as one of a kind and kind of gives them a blueprint for living healthy and not falling sick. So we're trying to just do all the things, feed ourselves, manage that stress so that we don't get sick. So there are different methods of healing if we do get sick. So diet, herbal remedies, exercise and lifestyle regimens tailored to individuals. And this is usually based on something called our constitution. It's our doshas. I'm going to talk a little bit more about doshas. So what is a dosha? So dosha is basically the biological energy that's believed to govern our physical, mental, and emotional state. So the doshas are related to the 5 elements, so air, ether, fire, water, and earth. And each dosha is a combination of elements. So there's 3 doshas are. So there's vata, which is a combination of air and ether. There's pitta, which is fire and water. And then kapha is water and earth. So all of us, I would say, have different constitutions. Even if we are similar, chances are the ratios are different. So individuals can be a combination of all 3 in different ratios. We tend to have one higher. There are some who are pretty balanced across the board, but generally speaking, I would say that we're usually dominant in 1 or 2. So what exactly determines our dosha? So there is our prakriti. So this is the nature of constitution. So this is the balance of the doshas at the moment that we're created. So at the moment of conception. And this is determined according to the genetics, diet, lifestyle, and emotions of the parents at the time of conception. So just breaking down the word prakriti, pra means original, and then kriti means creation. And then there is our vikriti. So this is our current state, and often in the world today, this is our imbalance. So breaking it down, V means after, kriti means creation. And one of the main goals of Ayurveda is to understand the person's vikriti. So that's usually what we're looking at when we're doing any sort of treatment. And then understanding what elements of a person's environment or lifestyle is contributing to the balance. So our vikriti, like I said, it's the moment after the conception. This is when our vikriti starts to form. So following that moment of conception, the human embryo is exposed and altered by its environment. So after birth, if the environment remains optimal, the child grows up healthy. However, in a less optimal environment, the three doshas can become disturbed. So a person that would reflect excellent health, their proportions of their vikriti and their prakriti will be the same. But most likely, especially these days, there's going to be a difference, and there's probably going to be an imbalance, usually reflecting an aspect of diet, lifestyle, emotions, or environment that's just not in harmony. And that's just, I mean, there's just so many things in the world today that throws us off balance. I mean, a lot of us are just living this super fast-paced lifestyle, pretty stressed out, just trying to keep up, trying to pay the bills. We're living in artificial lighting. Most of us aren't rising with the sun or going to sleep, you know, as the sun goes down, as Ayurveda recommends. A lot of us are just staying up way too late, not getting enough rest. So there's just so many things that can throw us off balance. And luckily, Ayurveda offers a lot of, you know, small little modifications we can make for our lifestyle to kind of move back towards balance. And it's kind of one of the reasons I'm so passionate about Ayurveda. It's not like this all or nothing science. There's just little modifications that you can do that just really makes you feel better and just makes you more connected to your environment. So a little bit more about the doshas. So there can be different doshic states. So there's three. You can be balanced. Like I said, that was when all three doshas are present in their natural proportions, also referred to as equilibrium. Your doshas can be increased. So this is when a particular dosha is in excess than the normal proportion. This is also referred to often as aggravated. So a dosha can be aggravated. I would say right now, so my primary dosha is vata, that's the wind and air and ether. And right now in the world, I would say that a lot of us are experiencing vata imbalance. It's kind of that ungrounded feeling. There's a lot of uncertainty going on in the world, a lot of space. A lot of us don't really know what we're doing or where the world's going. So I think a lot of us are dealing with a vata imbalance right now. And then a dosha can also be in a decreased state. So this is when the dosha is present in a lesser than normal proportion, so also referred to as reduced or depleted state. So when we're treating the doshic states, there's a couple general rules. So the one is that like increases like. And then the general rule number 2 is to usually pay attention to your primary dosha. So if you're trying to treat, if you have, you know, 2 that are kind of high, then you would treat the one that's higher, that's more out of balance. So yeah, we're more susceptible to imbalances in our predominant dosha. So for example, if you're primarily a pitta dosha, like that's the mix of fire and water, and say you eat spicy food, which spicy food is fire, it's heat. So this can cause acid reflux, it can cause a whole bunch of different problems in your stomach and your digestion. So in this case, with the rules in place, you would eat something cooling or something more alkaline to counteract that heat. So something like cucumbers or alkaline water. So that's kind of just an example of how you would treat. And if you are trying to increase your pitta, like increases like, then you could eat that spicy food. But yeah, usually you're trying to find that balance. So you're treating with opposites. And then one of the main goals of Ayurveda is just to understand the person's vikriti and then understand what elements of the person's environment and lifestyle is contributing to the imbalance. So sometimes it's what we're eating, sometimes it's we're not getting enough sleep. So it's really just trying to target exactly what that is. And often it can be a bunch of things throwing us off balance. But yeah, that's generally what we're trying to get at, is exactly, you know, what are those little things we can do that's just going to move us closer to balance. All right, so on to my favorite topic, food. So why is food so important in Ayurveda? Well, food is actually, a balanced diet is seen to be the foundation of all healing therapies, and it's actually the most basic way to treat the physical body. Food is viewed as the most important form of medicine. And like, thankfully, we're starting to see this more and more outside of Ayurveda. People are starting to really pay attention to food and realizing that it can really be medicine if we allow it to be. In Ayurveda, food is what gives us the strength, the sustenance, the energy, radiance. And Ayurvedic nutrition is intimately tied to the 3 doshas, so it takes into account the unique dietary requirements for each individual. So once you have determined your doshas, I know you guys probably, if you haven't, you know, you're just learning Ayurveda, you probably don't know your constitution, and that's fine. If anyone wants to work further on that, I'm definitely near Noke, or definitely willing to help. And today I'm just like going to go over more general rules when it comes to eating according to Ayurveda. And believe me, there's plenty of rules. Something I was actually really resistant to when I first started studying Ayurveda. I love to cook and I love all foods, and I like mixing stuff and getting creative. So when trying to cook with all these rules at first, I was like, man, this is just too much. It's overwhelming. But it's really, again, like I keep stressing, it's just about those small things you can do. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to follow the rules so strict. It's just like being aware of it, and just, yeah, noticing these small things you can do. And it's also actually harmful to do any like major dietary changes too quick. So say you're used to eating like, you know, a diet of heavy meat, you eat meats every day. If you were to drastically just cut out meat and start eating a bunch of raw fruits and vegetables, that's just going to be way too harsh on your system. That's probably going to result in like a lot of gas, probably some diarrhea, and chances are you're going to be like, oh, this isn't for me. These vegetables are just not for me. But it's just because it would be such a harsh change. So anytime you're like introducing any kind of change to your diet, Ayurveda really just suggests going slow. So in the case of the meat eater example, it would be more just maybe reducing how much meat you eat, either having a smaller portion, increasing the vegetables on your plate, or maybe just taking a day off from meat, having a day of vegetables and beans, whatever sounds good to you, but just taking it really easy on yourself. We never want to do anything that's going to put our body under more stress or get our nervous system off track. So that's the good news. It's also said that getting off a diet of like junk food and sugar, say you eat a lot of processed food and junk, you can actually experience some of the same withdrawal effects as like getting off drugs or alcohol. So again, it's really just like doing it gradually so that you're not feeling horrible and hating life and just wanting to get right back on to that bad habit that you were trying to overcome. Ayurveda says it's best to make 1 or 2 changes at a time and then take note. Like you make that one change, then you give it time and really take note of, you know, if you're noticing a difference or not. So yeah, that kind of leads to the next slide here. So in Ayurvedic treatment, patience is key. So unfortunately, there's really no quick fix. I know in the Western world here, that's what we love. We love those quick fixes. We want it. We want that pill that's just going to make us healthy. We want that one food that's just going to change our lives. And man, I've been studying health and experimenting so much in my life. And the one thing I've realized is there's absolutely no quick fix. And as much as those marketers like to try to get at us and make all these promises, it really is about just making these small, consistent changes, being patient, being dedicated, and really just starting to look at food in a different way, starting to look at it beyond just, you know, comfort or beyond something we just do mindlessly and just really seeing it as fuel for our body. So I'm just going to start talking about general guidelines for all the doshas. So again, you don't need to know what your constitution is, just all of these guidelines can be super helpful. So in general, the Ayurvedic diet is a focused diet. That's just like, I guess, thought that can be translated as pure. So generally it's a vegetarian diet, nutrient-dense food. So like sprouted whole grain breads, beans, lentils, fresh fruits and veggies. Honey's great, nuts and seeds. And those you eat in abundance. And then moderation of ethically sourced dairy products like goat's milk, cow's milk, ghee, which is clarified butter, very, very popular in Ayurveda, yogurt, and soft cheeses. Now, when I say ethically sourced, I mean, ideally we all have a cow or a goat on our property and we're getting that fresh milk every day, but you know, that's just not really the way the world is. It's hard to find that type of milk here. But if you are buying your milk from the grocery store, I would just at least look for organic. Organic, the smaller companies tend to be smaller batches. That's the best. I kind of, for me, I realize that dairy just doesn't sit well. So I actually make my own like nut milks now, which is actually pretty simple to do once you get used to it. But it really is just about, again, finding what works for you. And so I said vegetarian diet. Now I know that might be turning a lot of you guys off to Ayurveda because you probably enjoy meat. But I just want to stress that again, in Ayurveda, it's never an all or nothing approach. So while meat is usually like viewed as harder to digest and heavy and not usually recommended for daily consumption, it is actually used in the classical texts as a recommended treatment for some conditions. So people who are super depleted, they actually do recommend meat to help rebuild the tissues. So there's definitely some room for it in the diet. So if you are choosing to consume meat and you know you're just not ready to give up that meat, that's fine. It's just, again, like I said about the dairy, it's just making your choices on what meat you eat. So ideally, you're going to be eating meats that were killed in their natural environment. So staying away from anything like factory farmed, anything with hormones or antibiotics injected. I know that's often it's the cheaper choice at the grocery store, but I would say if you could make one little shift to your diet, maybe just eating meat less, and then when you do eat it, just eating that higher quality meat. I know here in Hawaii we're lucky, and there's you can get your local pig. We can get the delicious, I love from Molokai, the deer, which I have no problem eating if it's ethically hunted and it's great. So we are lucky to be living here and to have access to some good quality meats. I know back home, I'm from Alberta, Canada, and I know there's a lot of good cows. So it really is. I mean, if you're attached to your meat, I'm not saying you need to cut it out, but just maybe bringing that awareness to where your meat's coming from. I mean, a lot of the meats out there are slaughtered in horrible ways, the poor animals, and sometimes they're even killed with poison, which that's going into them, and you're eating that. So it's just something to be aware of. The unfortunate reality of, there's such a demand for meat, and people are trying to meet that demand by, cutting corners. It's kind of the same with vegetables, what we're seeing with GMO and non-organic farming practices, just all these things people are trying to do to produce more and to put more output. But if we're looking at it from a health standpoint, all these practices are fairly new, and our bodies are just not used to processing these things that are added to the food, and it's just not good. It's, poison. So if we can make those small changes and just really trying to focus on that quality, then it's definitely going to make a difference. And then there are better meats named by Ayurveda. So each dosha has better recommended meats, but just generally speaking, they say to choose lighter, again, ethically sourced meats. So chicken, fish, we're lucky to have a lot of amazing fish here, shrimp, turkey. Then beef and pork are said to be the least recommended because they are the heaviest and most difficult to digest. Okay, so now quantity of food. So ideally, food should be taken in the right quantity. So ideally, when we're eating, our stomach should be 1/3 food, 1/3 liquid, and 1/3 empty. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for me, this is like my biggest struggle. Something ever since I was little, and I think it has to do with the portion sizes that we have when we go out here. Hard for me to feel satisfied unless I'm like full to that point of like almost wanting to just blow up. And it's something I've been working on, but I still sometimes eat way too much. Of course, end up paying for it, lying down after just like, oh, I'm never doing that again. It does happen, but once you have this awareness, and it totally makes sense, if we're stuffing ourselves with so much food, we're just overloading our digestive system, and it's not good. You don't feel good, and if you tend to enjoy the food less and less the more you eat. I guess one of the greatest addictions we're seeing in the world today, especially now, I feel like during COVID, is food. I mean, so many of us are just in that habit of emotional eating or eating when we're bored or just eating out of habit. And instead of really just tuning into our bodies and asking, are you hungry? Like, what are you craving? Maybe you're craving something because you're actually deficient, or is it just an emotional craving? So the beautiful thing about Ayurveda is it really does encourage us to develop that connection with ourselves and to really get to know our body beyond just our, unconscious habits. So yeah, Ayurveda says that any food can actually be harmful. So even if you're eating the healthiest food, any food can be harmful when taken in excess. And then even foods that they, maybe don't recommend, like a cup of coffee or a glass of wine, if you are having it, once in a while, one with loving awareness, it's fine. So it really just is about making those informed choices. And then our food addiction, I mean, it's not all our fault. It's a lot of what's out there today. So, you walk through the grocery store and most of the foods out there are so processed, filled with so many foreign ingredients. Like, what the heck is this? A lot of them way too much sugar, salt, and man, that stuff is addictive. Like sugar, I would say, is one of the worst addictions. I love sugar. I love sweets. But I'm aware, sometimes I get in a bad time where I'm just like, I feel like I need sweet every day after every meal, but it's just such a horrible addiction. So it's definitely something to be aware of. Looking at your labels when you are buying that prepackaged food and checking out how much sugar, checking out how much salt, just little things. Overall, Ayurveda tells us to just stay away from processed foods, but I know, it's hard. A lot of us work and it's hard to come home at the end of the day. You've worked your full day, it's 7 o'clock, you get home and having to cook a meal from scratch. I know it's not going to be realistic for everyone, but the more we can do it and the more we can get in the habits of it, the better for our bodies. Okay, so aside from quantity of food, there is also the quality of food. So it is best, of course, to choose fresh. Fresh is always going to be the first choice. And again, we are lucky to be here in Hawaii where year round we can, go to the farmer's market and there's freshly grown produce. I know not everyone is that lucky. So if you aren't, then, you're left with canned or frozen. So they do recommend, if you're choosing between the two, definitely frozen is going to be your best bet. They say that there is a little bit more of the prana, the life force, the energy left in the food. So definitely frozen over canned. Again, ideally, you're going to be choosing organic without those pesticides, poisons sprayed on, or home locally grown. I definitely tend to just go with locally grown. I'm lucky to live here on the North Shore and, have the relationship with some of the farmers, so I kind of know, they grow their food with love. In season is also probably the best way to go because that just ensures that it's going to be fresh. It's not, hasn't been sitting or too early, and then grown on good quality soil. I mean, that's getting pretty specific. I mean, but if you're in an ideal world, there you go. That's what they say. And freshly prepared food. So this is another one I had a hard time with because I live by myself and I tend to make a huge pot of whatever I'm making, and then, I'll have it for the next few days. But unfortunately, Ayurveda tells us the longer that food sits in the fridge, the more the nutrients are going to be depleted. And luckily for me, I don't eat a lot of animal products, and those are the ones that tend to decay faster and lose their nutrition quicker. So vegetables are a little bit better if you're going to be doing that. Make a big pot and eat more later, which again, that's the reality for a lot of us. We just don't have the time to be cooking this fresh meal from scratch every day. But if you do, definitely give it a go. It's better. So speaking for the preparation of food, again, there's quite a few little guidelines here. So when cooking, ideally the foods should be appropriately prepared. So just not recooked, not reheated, burned, or overcooked. So I kind of got in the habit of, if I am eating leftovers, I try not to reheat it. As much as I love warm food and it's actually good for my vata dosha, sometimes I'll just try and not reheat it and eat it. Because again, the more you reheat it, the more life force, the more prana, the nutrition is just being zapped out of it. So you can handle just eating it cold, go for it. But if you need to reheat, that's fine. I would just stay away from the microwave. That's probably the greatest zapper of nutrients to our food. So generally in Ayurveda, cooked food is going to be preferred. over raw food just because it's already partially digested via cooking. Therefore, it's easier for our digestive fire to work on. So I'll talk a little bit more about our digestive fire and the importance of digestion, but it's huge in Ayurveda. It's one of the central themes, is just that we don't overwork our digestive system and are able to assimilate those nutrients. So raw food is said to be harder to digest. And actually undigested food becomes a toxicity in the body. So whatever we can't process, and that's going to often be those, those additives, those weird foreign ingredients. But in Ayurveda, those are said to turn into a substance called ama. And ama is like a sticky, sludgy kind of substance that builds up in our body over time when we aren't, treating our body so well or eating the wrong foods. And of course, there's treatments for that in Ayurveda, but ideally, we're trying to limit the intake of foods that build up this ama. And cooking at home is definitely said to be best. Restaurant food, as much as I love it, I love to go out to eat, and that's something I'll probably never stop doing. But it's just something to be aware of. Usually restaurant food is less quality because it's usually overspiced, mass prepared. It's usually prepared in advance. They want to make it taste as good as possible, and that usually means adding probably a little bit more of everything than you normally would. And it is important in Ayurveda, and this may sound a little woo to people, but it really is true, is to prepare your food with love and to really put that love and intention into the dishes you're making. And I think a lot of the times in restaurants, we have people who don't necessarily want to be working there. It's kids who just don't quite understand that it's just a job to them. So that is just something to consider when you're eating in a restaurant. Also in cooking, it's important to not cook at too high of a temperature because too high can again deplete that nutrition value of your food. Staying away from really heavy oils, like I mentioned before, avoiding that microwave. If you can just reheat something in a pot over the microwave, it might take, a little bit extra time, not too much, but it really is gonna make a difference. And then we just don't wanna undercook the food. Undercooked food can actually cause malabsorption. So if it's undercooked, sometimes you're not gonna get the full nutrients from the food. And an example of this is potatoes. So actually potatoes, you aren't able to get the full nutrition until they are cooked. So if you were to eat a raw potato, you'd be getting way less value out of it than cooked. So yeah, I know the raw food diet has been popular for a while, and there are, some constitutions in Ayurveda that maybe could benefit a little bit from raw foods. Particularly if you're trying to cleanse, raw food is good for that, but I wouldn't suggest it for a long-term plan. Cooked food is just said to be more nutritive, more building. We're trying to build our tissues. What we eat really does turn into our body. It builds us up literally. So we want it to be as building and nutritive as possible. And yeah, those raw foods, they just tend to be lighter, so they just don't build up our tissues. And then finally, one last little note here. I don't really know the background information of this, but it was in a couple books, so I'll share. It just says that electric cooking is inferior to gas. So the best way, I guess, to cook your food is if you have a gas stove. And I fortunately do. I live off-grid, so I have a very old school wonky gas stove top, but it works. All right, so these 6 tastes. So something else really important in Ayurveda is just paying attention to taste. So it said that these 6 tastes, once we can really start to identify them and develop our tastes for them, when we can include these 6 tastes in our meals, that is a solid meal. Now, depending on your doshas, it's going to be different proportions of the tastes, but ideally we're going to incorporate all 6 tastes in each meal. I'll just go over a little bit on these 6 tastes. So the first one is sweet with the elements, that is earth and water. So some examples of sweet foods is going to be ghee, honey, pumpkin, beets. Not going to be like, white sugar. That wouldn't be ideal Ayurvedic. I mean, it is sweet, but that wouldn't be the ideal. I would say honey or maple syrup. And then there's sour. So sour is a blend of fire and earth. So that's going to be your citrus fruits, yogurt, sour cream, kimchi, anything fermented. Salty, which is fire and water. Foods that are salty are seaweed, kelp, black olives, tamari. Again, a lot of processed foods are salty, chips, for example. And again, that wouldn't be a recommended salty food, but it is considered salty. There's pungent, which is a blend of fire and air. Some examples of pungent going to be spices like cayenne, garlic, ginger, cardamom. We'll actually be using ginger and cardamom in the Kitchari today. There's astringent, which is air and earth. Some examples of that's green banana, okra, which grows beautifully here, turnip, alfalfa sprouts. And finally, we have bitter, which is a blend of air and ether, and that's going to be leafy greens, turmeric, eggplant, bitter melon. So each of these different tastes do different things to our bodies. So I'll just go over that a little bit. So the sweet taste is said to build our tissues and calm our nerves. The sour taste is said to cleanse our tissues and increase the absorption of other minerals in our food. The salty taste is said to improve the taste, lubricate our tissues, and stimulate digestion. Bitter is said to detoxify and lighten the tissues. Pungent is said to stimulate digestion and our metabolism. And then astringent is said to absorb water, tighten our tissues, and actually dry fat. So most foods are composed of more than just one taste. So I'll give you an example. Garlic is actually composed of all the tastes except for salty, but there's always a primary taste. So in the case of garlic, the primary taste is pungent. I know this sounds like a lot, and something you can just slowly kind of look at and learn. Definitely something I'm still kind of learning and trying to incorporate into my cooking. But it is super fascinating, and I think there's definitely something to it. And actually, a lot of my favorite dishes I come to realize actually are well balanced, and there are amazing Ayurvedic cookbooks out there that already have these, pre-made balanced meals with all the tastes. So that's definitely a good place to start if you're completely new to it. And yeah, so from a modern nutritional perspective, the 6 tastes satisfy each of the major dietary building blocks. And then the taste of the herbs also increase this. So for example, sweet foods are generally rich in carbohydrates, and which is needed to build our tissues. Then pungent foods, like I said, usually help increase enzymatic activity. So it said that the right combination of the 6 tastes just stimulates the proper sequence of digestion. So there's a different sequence of digestion of these tastes. So sweet taste is generally the heaviest, and that one is usually metabolized first, and then followed by sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent, which is the lightest to digest. And so what's really actually interesting to note when you look at this is that the sequence of digestion isn't actually in line with a lot of the ways we eat foods in the West. So generally speaking, we usually tend to enjoy our rich, sweets at the end, like that's our desserts. We'll have, a nice slice of pie after our meal. But actually, if you're looking at the way we digest, it would be better to eat our sweets at the beginning of meals, which sounds crazy. And I told my mom, Mom, I told you cake for dinner was a good idea. I was right all along. So what I've kind of gotten in the habit of doing now, and I have such a sweet tooth, I'll try to eat my sweets just as a snack. So without any other food, just on their own, a few hours before or after eating, not to mess with the digestion. So that's just a simple little practice. And then we also tend to eat our salads at the beginning. And again, the astringent and bitter flavors found in salads is actually the ones that are digested last. So technically we should be eating our salads last. So it's just interesting to look at these unconscious habits we've learned from, childhood and how we eat our food. And again, it's not like we need to, completely overhaul exactly how we eat, but it's cool to just bring this into our awareness and maybe just to see the little ways that we can make these changes, or at least just be more aware. And if you are someone who craves something sweet after a meal, there are some really amazing drinks that you can have from Ayurveda after. There's something called lassi. It's like a yogurt kind of drink. I have a recipe for it on my blog if anyone's interested, but I've been having that to cure my little sweet tooth after eating a meal. So there are kind of ways to help your digestion and still satisfy that little sweet craving. So I talked a little bit about digestion, so I'm just going to go into it a little bit more. So in Ayurveda, health really does begin with proper digestion. So our digestive fire, it's called Agni in Ayurveda. So if it's not functioning properly, even the healthiest diet's not going to be assimilated. So if our Agni is completely off, we could be eating the healthiest meal, but we're really not absorbing the nutrients from that food. So important signs that we have good digestion include regular bowel movements. And of course, there's a whole science to this bowel movement. I won't get into it too much since this is a food and we're about to get in the kitchen, but it really is about having a well-formed bowel movement. Feeling hungry at regular times, and having a light and energetic feel in the mind after meal. So not that like I described of wanting to lie on the floor and you're, you know, useless for the next hour after overeating. It's more about just feeling light in the body, light in the mind, nourished and satisfied. And then signs that your digestion or your Agni might be disturbed is going to be heartburn, bloating, constipation, indigestion. In Ayurveda, digestion is actually said to begin in the mouth. So it's really important how we chew our foods. The saliva is actually what helps break down and pre-digest the food. So if we're not chewing our food properly, and this is something I've worked on over the years because I was definitely someone who would just scarf down my food. But yeah, just chewing it enough really starts that digestive process, and it's super important. It can throw off the whole digestion if we're just scarfing down the food and not chewing properly. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about that digestive fire. So there's 4 states of our Agni, our digestive fire. So it can be balanced, irregular, sharp, or weak. So when the Agni is balanced, ideally, it ensures proper nourishment, balanced energy levels, regular elimination, strong immunity, a clear complexion, excellent circulation, and then just overall strength and vitality. There's a few different ways that our Agni can become weak or aggravated, and this includes eating out of accordance with our constitution, so just eating foods that are aggravating or imbalanced dosha, overeating, like I mentioned, eating tasteless foods. So it actually, the spices are there for a purpose, not just to taste good. They do have a function, and that is to help us digest or help antidote some of the negative qualities of our food. Drinking too much water with our meals, and this is another one I had a hard time with, but ice cold water is a no-no. So the ice cold water is said to lessen the strength of our Agni. It's a digestive fire. So you imagine pouring ice cold water on that, it's going to make it, you know, the fire is going to burn a little less strong. So try to stay away from that ice cold water if can. And instead it's better to have room temperature or just slightly warm water. And actually having just a cup of warm water before your meals is said to be a great practice. Another one, eating at irregular times. So if you're just always randomly eating, that's not the greatest. Your digestion likes to kind of know what to expect. So I guess there is a little bit to, you know, those 3 meals of the day that we were taught to eat. And then just resisting the urge to eat. So if you're depriving yourself, you're hungry, but you're like, whatever, I'm trying to lose weight or I don't have time. So by depriving yourself of eating, you are going to mess with your digestive system. So it's definitely helpful if you're on the go a lot, just to maybe have snacks you can eat, just to really listen to your body and feed yourself when you are hungry. The ways that you can improve your Agni, improve your digestive fires. If you're sitting there right now and like, oh man, this is me, I think my digestion is a little off, I'm experiencing some of those things. There are some things you can do. So you can add the pungent spices to your food, spices like cumin, cayenne. You can drink spicy teas like ginger tea. Ginger, as a lot of us know, is great for digestion, and it's delicious. You can do physical activity that helps strengthen the Agni by stimulating your overall metabolic activity. And then one of the practices I started about a month ago, which I'm loving, I'm trying to replace my morning coffee, which I didn't do this morning, but anyways, is lemon water first thing in the morning. It's a great way to get your digestive juices flowing. And it's nice to have a morning drink to look forward to. I started to realize that my coffee was more just like a habit. It was just like a ritual in a way. So like I can still be satisfied as long as I have my warm drink. All right, so enough blabbing on the screen. It is time to get into the Kitchari. But before we do, I'll just go over, in case you guys aren't familiar with Kitchari, what Kitchari exactly is. So there's a picture of a Kitchari I made recently. So Kitchari is a combination of white basmati rice, mung dal, which is a split yellow mung bean, ghee. You can also use coconut oil if you're vegan, and then a unique blend of spices that create the simple balanced meal that is Kitchari. So why is Kitchari so amazing? Well, first off, it is a complete protein. So that combination of the white basmati rice and the mung dal create a complete protein. On their own, they're kind of lacking some of the amino acids to meet all the requirements nutritionally. And it's actually a really just delicious combination together. And then I like to put different vegetables in mine just to make it more exciting. me and Noko are about to start a 7-day Kitchari cleanse, which I'm not exactly looking forward to. It's a long time, 7 days, but I'm definitely gonna probably have to at least switch up the vegetables I put in to keep it interesting. Today I'm gonna use carrots. I'm gonna use sweet potatoes. I went out this morning on the hunt for some Okinawan, the purple potatoes, because they're my favorite, but I realized everyone on the North Shore doesn't wake up till about 8:39, so nothing was open. So I'm working with what I have. I'm gonna use a different sweet potato, but still sweet potato. I'm gonna grab some chard from my garden too. And Kitchari is great because it's actually good for all constitutions. So it doesn't matter, again, if you don't know your constitution, chances are your digestive system is going to like Kitchari. Now, definitely don't quote me on that because there's always exceptions to any general rule in Ayurveda. But from what I've observed and people I've talked to, most people are really able to enjoy Kitchari. It's so nourishing and so easy to digest. The mung dal, that split bean, that's the primary ingredient. And again, like I said, we're about to do a cleanse. It's really good for cleansing and scraping our digestive tract. And it's just easier to digest because it's split, so it is already partially digested. So yeah, when eating beans, generally speaking, split beans are always going to be better, split or sprouted, definitely. And then the protein content of Kitchari supports stable blood sugar levels so that your energy and mental clarity are balanced after you eat. And this is great in the cleansing process. You are doing it in a cleanse program. I know a lot of cleanses out there are so harsh. There's like those, I don't know, lemon water cleanses where all you have are lemon water or raw juice, and it's just so harsh. And it tends to, I would say for most people, be more disturbing than anything. So a Kitchari cleanse is just a really easy, nourishing way to cleanse your body, where you're not out there feeling so deprived, feeling weak, feeling miserable. I mean, definitely you might experience a little bit of side effects if you're, heavily detoxing off a really processed diet, but it's nothing like, those extreme fasts that you do. All right, so we're gonna get to it. I'm just going to get my screen shared here so you can actually see hopefully what's going on. Can you guys see that okay? Kind of blurry, but we'll have to work it. I'm just gonna grab my pot. I pre-chopped everything. I had a feeling that time would be limited. So I did send, you guys do have the recipe that you can follow along with. I am kind of the kind of cook, I've made Kitchari so much that I'm not the greatest at following exact measurements. So today when I do it, I'm gonna kind of just do my thing and just explain more the why versus the amounts. So then when you're making it yourself, you can just follow. If you're new to it, definitely just follow the recipe. But the more you make it, and that's the beautiful thing about cooking, you just get more comfortable and you kind of get to know what you like in terms of spice. Some of us like a little bit more spice, some of us don't, so you can start adjusting. But it's really a great place to start, is just to start by following recipes. And I'm actually doing the same right now. I mean, beyond Kitchari, Ayurvedic cooking is fairly new to me, so I'm actually, for the first time since I was little, like using a cookbook, and it's actually really fun. So once you kind of start from somewhere, you can kind of adjust and play around. So there's always room to have fun. So we're gonna start off first with the pot. We're gonna put our ghee. So ghee, like I said before, is that clarified butter. So clarified butter, ghee is, major in Ayurveda. It's said to be like one of the most nourishing substances that we can have, and it's so delicious. I love it. I put it on everything. Well, you can't see me, but I put it on toast. I put it on pretty much all my cooking now. It's the oil I use, and of course every dosha can tolerate different amounts of ghee, but mine definitely I can have a lot. So we're going to start off by heating the ghee in the pan. So I'm just going to put this on. Heat it up. And I had mentioned before about how when you're cooking, it's important to be infusing your food with love. So a practice I like to do when I cook, before I cook, is I usually will have my little Ganesh right here. This is the deity that I worship or that I honor. So I usually will light incense and light my sage and just kind of cleanse the kitchen area. So I'm going to do that. Again, this is like a take it or leave it kind of thing. It may sound a little wonky, but it's just a nice practice. Just of connecting and really enjoying the cooking process. I know a lot of people are intimidated by the kitchen. or it's new to them, and it's just, but really it can be so enjoyable when you just like relax and just, you don't need to expect perfection. You'll get better the more you do it. Like anything, the more you practice, the easier and better it will get. So just cleansing the space. So I've been pre-soaking my mung dal, and this is something I think is in the recipe, but it really helps with the cooking time. Ideally, you'll pre-soak it overnight, but oftentimes I'm not that good at planning ahead. So even if you just pre-soak it for an hour or so, it's fine. So I just have it here. I added some filtered water. This one's been sitting for a while now, and that's ready. And my basmati rice, you just want to make sure to really wash it. Make sure you get off, you know, whatever the heck they sprayed on this. This is organic, but you never know what's going to be on there. So it's good to rinse everything. So yeah, our ghee is heating up, and now we're going to start. There's a sequence for spices when you're working with spices. So generally speaking, when you're doing spices, you start with the ones that need to pop. So any full seeds. So we have the coriander seed and the mustard seed. So we're going to start with that. So I'm just going to put my amounts again. The amounts will be in the recipe. But I just like kind of go with it. Yeah. I was going to talk a little bit about the qualities of the spices. I have a slide for that. I don't think we're going to have time, so I'll just kind of tell you what I remember about the spices. So generally speaking, spices in Ayurveda, they just help the food, help with our digestion, help antidote any of the negative qualities of the food. So say you're eating something like a spicy pepper, but you want to neutralize that because your pitta is high, then something like coriander or cilantro, those are both cooling. So adding that's going to help kind of balance out the heating qualities. So it really is about finding that balance. So yeah, coriander seed, that's the one that's in there now. It's good for cooling. The digestion booster, it helps with circulation, and it's just delicious. And then mustard seed, this is definitely in pretty much every recipe I've seen for Kitchari. This one's also a great digestion booster. I think that's its main purpose, and it gives a really nice kind of flavor. So basically, with the seeds in the in the ghee, we're waiting until the seeds begin to pop. So they're literally going to start popping off the pan once they're ready. So once the popping, it kind of opens it up and releases the prana or the energy of the seed. That's when you know that you're ready to start adding the next. So once that happens, then we're going to start adding the next dry ingredients. So we have our fennel here, and I like to add cardamom, so I'm going to add that next, and the cumin. So these guys go in next. So when I'm talking about the order, so it's the seeds that go first, and then any dry spices, then that's not powdered. So anything dry that's like, you can see this is like a full cumin seed. I don't know if you can see, it's blurry, but anyways, anything that's in its full form is going to go in next. And then from there, you go on to your fresh stuff. So I have the fresh turmeric here and the fresh ginger. That's going to be the next stuff. And then finally, if you are working with dry powdered stuff, that's going to go in last, because that's going to have the highest tendency to burn if it's cooked for too long. Again, like I said before, temperature is super important. So I have my temperature. I'm going to try and do it a little quick. 6 out of 8. But if you have the time, it's best to just keep it medium and just really be patient with it, and just really give everything the time it needs to properly cook. Burnt spices, they taste horrible, and again, it's like the medicinal value is going to be zapped right out of them if they're burnt. So yeah, and ghee is another thing, man. I don't know if any of you guys have ever made ghee, but it's one of those things that you really need to be on your game when you're making it. Like, I've lost count of the times I've burnt it. It's like so finicky, where it can be great 1 second and you turn away to go do something, and a minute later it's brown butter or it's burnt butter. So it really is one of those things that's a practice to make, and a practice of being present. When I make my ghee now, I usually will stand right there and watch it, just because I've burnt it so many times, and I sometimes sing mantra to it or try and infuse that love into it, because it is such an importance. and nourishing ingredients in Ayurveda. And I really feel like it's what makes the Kitchari so delicious. But I know some of us are vegan, so if you are vegan and ghee is just not your jam, then you can definitely use coconut oil. But the good thing about ghee is if you don't have dairy because you're lactose intolerant, a lot of people can still actually handle it because ghee is essentially the clarified butter where the milk solids are removed. So if it is just for that reason, then I have a girlfriend who she can't really handle any other dairy, but with ghee she can really handle it. So I would say maybe try experimenting and see if you can add it to your diet, because it really is just a game changer, I would say. I love ghee. And you can also just buy it at the stores. Most of the stores now have it, Whole Foods, Down to Earth. You can order it online. If you are buying it in the stores, I would say try not to buy it. Sometimes they have it in the refrigerator, which is not the greatest. You're actually supposed to keep it at room temperature. So I know Whole Foods actually keeps it not in the refrigerator. Oh, it's open. I wish I could show you guys. Let me see, actually. Maybe I can show you. I'll drop this in the... All right. Of course, I'm holding something. All right. So now we're going to add our next ingredients. So we got our cumin, our fennel, and our cardamom. I know for some of you guys, this is just a lot of ingredients. Like, man, I don't have half of this, half of this crap in my kitchen. Like, this isn't for me. It's too much work. But you don't have to do them all. I mean, you can do a few, and really, it's really fun to set up your kitchen. If you are gonna, try and explore this Ayurvedic way of cooking more, then I would say it's totally worth. You can order them on Amazon. Most of these are available in the grocery store. It's just maybe you're not familiar with, but it really is cool to play around because, like I said before, the spices are really what make our food more, nutritional, more of a medicine, really. So I would highly recommend maybe even getting a few if you're not familiar with, and just experimenting, tasting, seeing what the flavor tastes like, and thinking how it tastes good. Now that these are in, just mix it all together. I'm gonna give it a little bit, more like 30 seconds, and we'll just add our fresh ginger and our fresh turmeric. These are my favorite. I tend to put a little bit more than the average recipe will say, just because I'm used to the flavors now and I love it. And I have a pretty good digestive system to start, so I can handle a little bit more, I guess. But yeah, it's a good starting point to just follow the recipe and use what they say, because you don't want to be put off. I mean, some of them are strong flavors, so you want it to be edible and you want to enjoy what you're eating. Okay, so I'm going to add it. Got our ginger here, our turmeric. And grated is best. If you have a grater, I would definitely say grate it. And if you don't, you can just try and chop it as small as possible. Give it your best bet. You want to keep the spices hydrated, so if it looks like it's getting a little bit dry, it's good to have more of your ghee on hand. You can just add a little bit more. You can also just add water too, if you don't want too much ghee, or you really just want to follow the recipe. Water always helps, but if it's looking dry, it has the chance of burning, which we don't want to do. At this point, it starts to look really nice. I'll show you guys what it looks like in the pan. Just love seeing all the colors and everything mixing together. It's coming nice. It's really fragrant. I wish this computer could smell, but it's making me hungry. At first, it was like, especially when you're cleansing, you're supposed to have kitchari for breakfast. I was like, I do not want to eat these spices in the morning. Are you kidding me? Like, if anything, I want like toast with peanut butter, but it's crazy how you can just get used to something. Like, the more you have it, the more I started to crave it in the mornings. It's like, now I'm just smelling this, I'm like salivating here. I'm ready to eat it. So I also like to add to my kitchari, I add some flaked coconut, and it actually is in that recipe. I add it because it tastes delicious in there, and also because my pitta, that's that fire element, tends to be high. I tend to run hot. Been sweating my butt off all summer over here, and I've kind of been on the go. So I'm always trying to do these like little cooling practices. So for my kitchari, I add flaked coconut. I'm gonna add that in now. Again, I think the recipe says something like 2 tablespoons. I add a little bit more. It's so delicious. And I like to get it a little toasty, which is why I put it in with the herbs. Kind of gets that flavor of the herbs and then toast the coconut. Does anybody have any questions? I've been blabbing for so long.
Julie, if somebody doesn't have fresh turmeric, would they just use powder?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've had a hard time actually lately finding fresh all the time. I think it's just such a seasonal thing where people grow a lot, you have a lot, and then not. So definitely you can use the powdered. You would just add it in, yeah, at the end instead of before. But yeah, it still tastes good. Someone else? I see someone.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to cook with ghee and you don't have coconut oil, can you just cook with water?
You could, but I have to say that the fat component in the dish, it does have its role, that fat. It helps you feel nourished. It helps with the spices. So a fat with the spices kind of brings out those medicinal qualities. So, I mean, you can definitely, if you are, really trying to avoid any sort of fat, you can. But otherwise, you could use other oils too. I don't know, like avocado oil or whatever oil you have. But yeah. All right, so now the spices have been going for a minute, so I'm gonna now add my vegetables. So like I said, no purple Okinawan sweet potato, unfortunately, but we have the white variety. We have some nice locally grown carrots and then these little beets. They were the cutest beets. I wanted to save them to show you guys. They were like this big from my little organic farmer. But anyways, I wanted to chop it so I wasn't scrambling chopping here with you guys. So I'm just gonna add that. I made a little heart with it again, just infusing the love into the food. All these little things you do, it sounds silly, but it really mixing it all together now, and at this point again it might start getting a little dry, so this is where you can add water just to keep it hydrated. And the cool thing with adding vegetables, I think I mentioned before, once you do know your constitution and your dosha, then there are extensive lists of vegetables available out there, so you can kind of customize the vegetables you add to your dosha. So it's kind of just a fun way of taking your kitchari to the next level. But by no means is it, required. That's just like extra credit, geeky kind of stuff that I like to do. Like, what am I trying to fix today? What have I, am I running hot? Am I vata all over the place? Can't focus or get anything done? So just other layers to the practice that you can do. So again, I'm going to show you what it looks like in the pan. Back on. Now the vegetables are just in there. So I usually just like to cook vegetables with the spices before adding the mung dal and the basmati rice. Usually just for a few minutes. Just from experimentation, I've just found that that's kind of the perfect time so that everything is cooked properly. Like, we don't want our vegetables to be overcooked. We don't want anything to be overcooked. So I've kind of gotten the timing down, and the recipes, of course, have, I think, the timing down also. So again, you can just follow that. Now, salt. I haven't added salt yet. It is in the recipe, so I'm going to add the salt. I know a lot of people I've talked to recently are on this whole avoiding salt train, not wanting to put salt in anything. So again, this is optional. You don't have to add the salt if you don't want to, but I find it really helps bring out a lot of the other flavors. And again, like I said, that with the taste, you want the balanced flavor profile. So salt does have a place. Tended to get a bad name just because people, we usually consume it in excess. So that's why a lot of people are avoiding salt. I would say if you're going to cut out salt, just cut out those processed foods. Maybe, cut back on those chips. That saying with the Lays, you can't only eat one. Like, it's true, because it's just freaking addicting. I mean, I'm a chipaholic. I love chips, so I do sometimes still indulge. But yeah, it's just being aware of these foods sometimes aren't the greatest. But one of the favorite things our teacher actually says is it doesn't really matter. Like, you can break the rules. Once you know all these rules, it can be so overwhelming. But if you break the rules, it's fine. You just need to do it with loving awareness. So just being aware that, okay, maybe this isn't necessarily greatest for me, whatever it is, this chocolate cake, this coffee that I know is gonna make my anxiety go up or whatever, but doing it with loving awareness where you're like, this is gonna nourish me, just looking at it and like giving thanks for it and looking at it as something nourishing and having it without that guilt, having it with love. And that is gonna change the vibration of the food in your body. So just little practices you can do. Because Ayurveda really, it's not about all or nothing. It's, you don't have to live your life so strict. You can really just still enjoy life and still, you know, choose a balance of foods in your diet. All right, so now we are going to add the basmati rice, and I need to strain the mung dal. So excuse me, my kitchen sink is in my bathroom, so I'm just gonna go and do that. Studio life over here, the Hawaii life, I guess. So yeah, so now it's strained. You can see I'm just gonna add it in. And then the rice. So usually with ratios, it's like 1-to-1 basmati rice to mung dal. I tend to like to put just a little bit more mung dal, just because I like it better than the white basmati rice. I feel like it has more of the nutrients. I like the texture better. But again, something you can play around with once you get more comfortable. So mixing it all together. Now it's really starting to smell delicious with the vegetables and the spices. So at this point, this is when we're going to add our water. So again, the recipe will have the measurements of how much water. I didn't measure, so I'm just going to give you guys my general rule here. So I don't know if anyone's ever used the rice cooker, but with the rice cooker, usually you'll just have just like ½ an inch of water over the rice. So it's kind of the same with this. So you want to pour your water where you can just kind of see it starting to come up over the mixture. So I'm going to do that and I'll show you what it looks like. And that's going to usually be the right amount. It's so loud, I'll change that. So yeah, now I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind. We're just going to pour the water in. Oh yeah, so I was going to say that there are different ways of eating your kitchari. So some people like to have it a little bit more watery, so almost more like soupy. I personally like to have it a little bit more almost like a fried rice texture. So again, this is just things that you over time as you make it, but either way, the nutrition is there. So let me show you what it looks like. I can add a little bit more. I feel like I can never filter enough water. My water thing is always empty. Drinking water with this crazy lady here, just heat. So let's see what it looks like. So as you can see, there's a big amount of water. Now it's just the waiting game. So we're going to cover it. First of all, just a little bit more water. We're going to cover it. So cover it, set your meat, your heat for your meat. You want your meat, I'll go to mid-range. And then we kind of just set it and forget it for about 15 minutes or so because it was soaked for so long. It should be good in about 15 minutes. We'll check it in about 15. And at that point, after the 15 minutes, I know we're at 10 o'clock, so we're just going to end and you can always refer back to the video just to see the end product, or I'll just post a picture or whatever. But yeah, so once it's done and it's cooked, for garnish, I like to put like fresh cilantro on. Again, that's another nice, really cooling spice. Add some good flavor. And sometimes I like to pour a little coconut cream over it. It really just tastes delicious. And again, if you are someone who runs hot, you're gonna just add to that cooling elements of it. Yeah, that's kind of it. So does anyone have any questions again?
I do. I have a question regarding spices.
Okay.
Some of these spices I really would not normally use. So how would you suggest storing them?
Storing them, definitely. So I like to have mine, I don't know if you can see it all out, but that's not the best way to store them. when they're exposed to light. Because I use it so much, it's fine. But if you're not using it often, keep it in a cupboard somewhere, fairly cool and dark is the best place.
How about the freezer? A freezer. Would you freeze them?
You could do the freezer. I wouldn't say it's ideal, but you definitely could. It would work. If you're going to use it once a year, then yeah, freezer, so you're not, waste. It's also great. You can go, down to earth or whatever, and you just buy a little bit at a time. If you don't want to commit to a whole freaking thing and you're going to make it, you can just go and just fill up a tiny, whatever you're going to use also. But yeah, I think, I forget what it was. It was something like 6 months shelf life, ideal for spices. I mean, I definitely go over on some of my spices. It's fine, but the longer you have it, generally, the more of the, the nutrition there.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
If I don't have basmati, but I have jasmine, can I use that instead?
You can. I think in the traditional text, they say basmati just because that's what was available in India. So I definitely use jasmine. And just speaking on the rice, I've had a lot of people ask if they can use brown rice instead, because, we've all been told brown rice is healthier. And there's a little bit more nutrition, but it actually is harder to digest. So it is better in this case to use white rice.
Okay.
I noticed that in the beginning you were burning something. It looked like.
Yeah.
So what was it you were doing?
So that was in the kitchen space. I did incense and I did sage. It's just a little ritual I like to do. Again, it's just like preparing the space. So sage is said to be cleansing. I do it every morning. I cleanse my space. I go outside. I bless the mountain. It's just like a little ritual that connects you to your space. And yeah, you can take it or leave it, but I like to do it. And it also just makes your place smell really nice. Anyone else? Man, I'm happy I didn't go too over here. I thought I'd be blabbing for way too long. Perfect.
Now, is this considered an entree or a side dish, or what would you describe this?
Yeah, it can be, like, nutritionally speaking, you can eat this and you're going to get it. Now, if you are someone, like I mentioned before, that loves meat and you're like, what the heck, this is not a meal, I need my meat. You can eat it as a side dish, like kind of a replacement for rice. But yeah, I mean, when you're looking at it from a cleansing perspective, this is all you eat and you get all your nutrients. So it can be eaten as a meal for sure. But yeah, it's whatever you're comfortable with. If it's new for you, then it might be better to not overwhelm yourself and to just have it as a side dish or just have a little bit along with whatever you'd normally eat. So it can definitely be either or. All right, well, if anyone has any more questions or anything that comes up, you can definitely contact me on my website. Emails there, social media also, and I have a bunch of other recipes. And if anyone wants, like I said, further guidance in terms of finding out what their dosha is or a list of foods or any sort of guidance, I'm definitely here. Happy to share.
One last question. If someone who was not into this thing this morning, if they wanted to observe it, has it been taped?
Yeah, it's actually being taped. I think it's going to be uploaded on the website there.
Super.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm recording it. I'll put it up on YouTube and I'll share that. I'll email it out to you guys to the link to that as well.
Yeah, I know it was maybe a lot. I tried to talk slow. I'm usually a fast talker, which is a positive thing. I tried to go slow, but it's definitely good to just refer back.
It's great. Thank you so much, Julie. So informative. Hope everybody else enjoyed it. I'm sure they did. And again, if you have any questions, I'm going to also be sharing Julie's contact information, her website, and all that good stuff. But thank you so much, Julie. Appreciate your time. You're so awesome.